What up, everyone? I have received a few requests to create a video that showcase SQL, using SQL to provide more insights for the stock market. Without further ado, the purpose of this video is to break down 5 components. The first component is a method I would like to share with you guys to basically pull stock prices from Yahoo Finance for free. Now, as of last year, it was a lot easier. This year, Yahoo decided to charge users money. But hey, there's always workaround to get stuff for free. So I will talk about this in a few minutes. The second component is to download SSMS software. SSMS software is SQL Management Studio. It allows SQL developers to write SQL query or just SQL. The third component is to download Notepad++, where it allows me to compare large data set, preview files. The fourth component is to learn basic SQL. I felt like I'm certified to teach everyone SQL because I am an experienced SQL developer. I've been coding SQL for, I don't know, the past 20 years or something. I've worked predominantly in healthcare and investment industry. And I also have a finance degree, so I feel like I'm more than qualified. The fact that I also trade stocks, SQL developer, Python developer, combining my technical and financial skills, I felt like I'm more than qualified to share with you guys some of my experiences and knowledge. And the last component I would like to discuss is, walk you guys through some examples to set up scripts, store procedures, functions by importing, cleaning, and analyzing stock prices and or volume. Now, for this video, I will mostly be using SQL. I'll hold off on using Python. Python is another way to fully automate this. So keep in mind this approach that I'm about to share is not fully optimized. It's probably a little bit easier to understand because this is just SQL. There's no Python involved. For my next series of videos, I will mention Python and how I use Python to fully automate everything. Alright guys, the first thing that we want to do is to go to Yahoo Finance. So let's go ahead and type in Yahoo Finance in our Google. So it's the first link here. And, let's say that we wanted to import stock price for NVIDIA. Let's type in the ticker, NVDA. This can be whatever tickers that you prefer. But for our demo purpose, we'll use NVIDIA, NVDA. Now, on our left-hand side, there's something called historical data. Let's go ahead and click on historical data. After clicking on historical data, we have a screen that has almost like an Excel grid. Date, open price, low, high, close, adjust, close. Let's go ahead and download the historical data. As of last year, I was able to download the historical data for free. Sometime this year, they changed that. First, they force you to log in. So you have to log into Yahoo Finance. And the fact that downloading historical data is no longer free, you would need to become a gold member. $40 a month. My advice is fuck that shit. We will not be paying $40 a month. Instead, I will show you guys one way to get data for free. So let's click on the back button. The one way to get free data is by selecting your preferred time frame. So let's say, for example, we wanted to download the past year's worth of NVIDIA historical price. So I would select 1 year, December 15th, 2023 through December 15th, 2024. Then I'll go ahead and highlight everything from here. And we can drag the scroll bar down towards the bottom, up to here. And once we highlight all of the rows that we desire, go ahead and right click, copy. Oh guys, I'm on Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 8, they all work the same way. The only thing is, if you're on a Mac OS or Apple computer, it's probably done a little bit differently. But it's the same concept. There's ways for you to highlight and copy and paste. So let's just go ahead and copy this. And I normally prefer Microsoft Excel. There's also Google Spreadsheet. So if Google Spreadsheet is your preference, go ahead and do that. Now, I have a spreadsheet created earlier, but let me just create it from scratch again. So open up a blank worksheet and then go ahead and paste your historical data. And the first thing I would do is to just preview it. Make sure it has the date, open price, high price, low price, closing price, adjusted price, and the volume. And if we scroll down towards the bottom, the last row should be December 15th, 2023. That looks good. First row should be December 13th, 2024. The 13th was last Friday. That was the last stock market day. December 14th and 15th is on the weekend. So that's the reason why we don't see December 14th and December 15th. All right, the next thing I'll do is to save the file as a CSV. On Excel, I'll click on Export, change file type, CSV. On Google Spreadsheet or your Apple's version is probably a little bit different, but every one of them should have some sort of format for CSV. So let's go ahead and save it as CSV. And for here, I'll save it to my desktop for now. All right, I'll call this NVDA because it's really just historical stock price for NVIDIA. Save, yes, closes out. When I click on refresh on my desktop, we should have NVIDIA. Now, for the purpose of our next step, which is to import it into SQL Management Studio, let's go ahead and save it to our C drive. Normally, I like saving it to my C drive because the file path is easy to memorize. So if I right-click on the properties, nvda.csv, the property should show C:/ as our location. This is important because we would have to specify our codes later to instruct SQL to import it from this directory. So that's the reason why I purposely chose the C drive. Right? It's nice and short, easy to remember. nvda.csv is our file name. Now, the second component I mentioned is to download SSMS software for free. All right, guys, with modern technology, it only makes sense for us to use AI. So let's go ahead and look for Copilot. So Copilot is an AI created by Microsoft. This AI is really just Microsoft using ChatGPT underneath the hood. So let's go ahead and ask Copilot, what is SSMS? According to Copilot, SSMS stands for SQL Server Management Studio. It's a software application developed by Microsoft used for configuring, managing, and administering all components within Microsoft SQL Studio. So it's basically like a graphical interface for us to write SQL. That's what that is. Okay. The second thing that we want to do is to download this. So let's just say, where can I download SSMS? Now I have my version downloaded already, but if someone wants to download it, go ahead and navigate to the Microsoft website. And the first thing you will see is download SSMS. Every few weeks or so, Microsoft continuously update SSMS. The latest version we're on is on 20.2. So I would recommend downloading the most stable version, which is this version here. Now the version I'm on is currently on version 18.7.1. It's a little bit dated, but that's fine. This is more than enough for our demo. So go ahead and download your SSMS. It may take a couple of minutes or hours to install, depending on how fast your computer is. All right, guys, so let's assume you finished installing SSMS. There should be an icon here. If not, then you may have to click on your lower left-hand search bar and type in SSMS. Once you type in SSMS in your search bar, you will see this icon called Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, whatever your version number is. Let's go ahead and open this guy up. Give it a few minutes for it to load up. And for the server name, we'll select localhost. SQL is actually stored in our desktop. We don't have it stored in the server. So server name is localhost. Now for localhost, I've set up many databases for my own analytics purpose. So let's expand databases. Under databases, yours will probably be empty, or you may have this AdventureWorks Data Warehouse, 2020, 2021, whatever versions you have. Go ahead and right click on this databases folder. On here, select new database and type in your preferred database name. You can call it test, whatever. Once you're satisfied with your database name, click on OK. When you click on OK, then your database should appear on your left-hand side. So earlier, I've created a database called Stock Demo. Now, for those of you who are familiar with my previous videos, I've created multiple scripts and tables under the stock slicer. For demo purpose, I basically want to create it from scratch to show you guys how it works. So under stock demo, Tables, we can delete this out for now. As soon as you expand tables and views, all of them should be blank because this database was just recently created. Now, for demo purpose, I have already created 4 scripts. First one is to create a table structure. So in SQL database, in order for us to query something, we have to store data into tables. So this is an example to create a table structure programmatically. The first section is to instruct SQL to specify the database. So let's go ahead and run the first 2 lines. I'll highlight the first 2 lines, click on execute, and now it knows to use stock demo as our database name. Now watch what happens. Let's say our database name was on access demo. So we could go ahead and click on a drop down box and click on stock demo to specify our database name. Or we could run this command line and say use stock demo, go, execute, and it will automatically toggle to stock demo. Now you probably notice I have brackets on here. Brackets are not really needed, so you can also run the codes without the brackets. What the bracket does is, if let's say you have special characters or spaces, then brackets inform SQL that, hey, this is the full complete database name, even if it includes spaces or numbers, which I would not recommend. For tables, database names, SQL objects, I would try to keep it user-friendly by not putting any spaces or numbers in there, if possible. Sometimes numbers are needed, but I would put numbers as the suffix, not so much the prefix. Right? So that's what this does. It instructs SQL to say, hey, this is the database that we will be creating our SQL objects shortly. The next command line is to drop the table if it exists. What this is saying is, if stock price import table exists, then drop it. This is important because by having this command line in place, it will essentially allow us to run this script numerous times without any error messages. The next step is to highlight create table. Create table, and this is the schema. By default, the schema is DBO. So even if you have the code set up without DBO, it will imply it's still DBO. That's a default behavior. So what this is saying is create a table name. For our case, I'm calling it stock price import. The reason why I'm calling it stock price import, because we will eventually import data from Yahoo Finance, right? And then these are the column names. So earlier, when I had copied all of the stock prices from Yahoo Finance, I purposely mimicked all of the column names. Now, let me go back to my power slide here. For our third component, I mentioned to download Notepad++. The reason why I mentioned Notepad++ is because this is by far the best free file preview editor. Let's go ahead to Copilot and ask, what is Notepad++? According to Copilot, Notepad++ is a free open source text and source code editor for Windows. There's a hyperlink on here. Let's click on Notepad++. On your left-hand side, click on download. And I would go for the most stable version. So click on download Notepad++. And then click on download. There we go. So go ahead and install this. For my case, I have Notepad++ installed. Same thing. Click on your search bar, type in Notepad++, and it should look like this. So let's go back to the Excel spreadsheet or CSV file that we just created, which is downloaded to my C drive. So rather than me opening it up with Excel, I could open it up with Notepad++ actually. Right click on your CSV file, navigate to edit with Notepad++, and this will allow us to preview it. Now I have an option called View, Show Symbol, All Characters. So that's actually the reason why you saw a lot of gibberish character. This is useful because sometimes things are invisible and you would like to view all kind of characters. So CR is carriage return, LF is line feed. This is saying carriage return line feed. Basically starts a new line. And this is a preview to ensure that the rows are consistent. Notice that Yahoo Finance also included the dividends, which we don't really need later. And I'll show you guys a way to clean that up. So for now, let's go back to the view, show symbol, and disable show all characters. Easier to read. Once we're satisfied with the output, let's go ahead and close this out. And we'll open up our first script from SQL, which is to create the structure. Let's go back here and ensure that we create our table structure. So this allows me to run it multiple times. Every time it's going to go into this database, drop the table if it exists, and create the table structure. Now the data types I've used here, varchart 1000, this is saying this is going to be all in text. This will result in the highest probability of not erroring it out when we set it up as varchart 1000. Right now, we're not really sure what's the appropriate data type. So that's why I purposely use varchart 1000. If varchart 1000 is not big enough, then make it 8000. But for this demo, varchart 1000 is big enough. So I purposely set varchart 1000 for all of our data elements. And then if we go back to our left-hand side, navigate to your tables. Sometimes the tables will not always appear. You have to right-click on here and click on refresh. And if you want to just now right-click on your table, select top 1000 rows to preview, and we have the table structure. Again, there's no data imported yet. We just created the table structure. Everything makes sense so far? Good. All right, let's move on to the second script. The second script involves us inserting data to our structure. So again, I have the command line to instruct SQL to use stock demo. That's our database. For you guys, type in whatever database that you prefer. And the next part is this is saying bulk insert everything from our location. So for this example, it happens to be C:/file name nvda.csv. Table name will be dbo.stockpriceimport, or just stock price import will work as well. With, this is the parameter section. There's multiple parameters. At minimum, I've only set up 2 parameters, which is format equals CSV. So SQL knows it's a CSV file. It doesn't matter if it's capitalized or lowercase. It works the same thing. And I'm saying import from the first row equals 2, because the first row itself already has a column header in it. So I'll open up the file one more time. So when we import the file, we're not importing the column header. The column header is not even user-friendly. See how there's spaces in here? Spaces after, close. So what I'm saying is import from index 2, meaning row 2, starts from here. So we're only going to import the data content, not so much the column header. All right, let's close this out. When you leave it open, SQL is going to error it out and say this process is being opened by another program or something. So you want to close out the file, right? So let's go ahead and run the script here. 256 rows affected, and we can go ahead and click on preview. And notice I have some kind of green line here. This is just a comment line. In SQL, when you start typing things, it thinks it's part of the SQL codes. But if someone wants to add comments, put in 2 dashes. The 2 dashes represents comment. SQL will ignore the green line. And this is a great way for us to preview our data sets. So earlier, I've downloaded 1 year's worth of data from December 13th, 2023 up until December 24. So we could do an order by, since it's not really sorted in order, say order by date. And this is from, actually this is not in data type. Yeah, so this is still in varchart. The sorting is not correct yet. So what we can do is maybe just do a cast for now. Cast this as actual date format. And then it should sort it correctly for us. There we go. So now I've converted the varchart 1000 to actual date format. When it's date format, it allows us to use the sorting order operation correctly. So from December 15th, 2023 up until December 13th, 2024. And we have NVIDIA's opening price, the high, low, closing price, adjusted close price, and volume. So that's the first thing, is we want to preview to ensure that this data set matches back to our CSV file from earlier. And notice for dividends, there's like these funky characters. The row itself, some columns are not populated because there is no high or low for dividends. And we see there's no. No in SQL simply means a blank, basically. It's never populated. Blank data, not populated kind of stuff. That's what this means, NULL. All right, so now that we have our data inserted, let's go to step 3. Step 3 is to create our final table. The final table is where we will properly format the data types. So we should have something called ticker, because later on when you start accumulating different tickers, it's important to associate the data elements with a ticker. So for ticker, data type is varchart50. And for date, this is where the actual format really matters. For date column, we're going to format it as date. Open, high, low, close, adjusted close. The data type we will be using is numeric 18, 2. What this means is 18 means that's the maximum number of digits to the far left of the decimal places. So let's say something like this. If a stock price is worth $100 million, numeric 18 is large enough to hold these digits here. Comma 2 means decimal places to the far right. So if a stock is valued at $100 million and 23 cents, 0.23 is enough for this data type. And currency, usually for the US stock market, for most tickers, I would say it only displays up to 2. Sometimes it's possible to have 4 decimal places. So if you prefer to store it up to 4 decimal places, then go ahead and just change this to a 4 instead of a 2. But for me, 2 decimal places is more than enough. So I'm leaving it as numeric 18, 2. And some of these data types, I have the word no at the end. That means that it's okay if some of these columns are not filled in. That's what the no means. You know, you can also type in not no just to explicitly type it out, make it more clear. So, you know, if you want to say ticker and date always needs to be filled in, is required, then type in not no, not no. For those that can be no, just type in no. And then for volume, I have set up as an integer. Now it's highlighted in blue because that's a syntax highlight. I can also close it out with brackets, you know, to escape any special characters. Same with varchart50. If I want to put brackets to make it more consistent, go ahead and do so. But this doesn't matter. It means the same thing. I can take these brackets out where I wanted to. So let's go ahead and create the table. Once it's created, the next thing we want to do is to add an index. So this command line means create unique cluster index. What this does is if the same ticker and date combination appears in our data set, we will get an error message. A lot of times when you add filters, you probably want to add a filter on the ticker, like NVIDIA, SPY, Apple. So by having an index in place, it will allow you to quickly search for that ticker or date. So that's actually the reason why I have this special command line. It ensures that there's no duplication based on ticker and date combination. Also ensures that if you were to query based on ticker or date, it will run super fast. So go ahead and run the whole script one more time if you want. It's defensive, so feel free to run this multiple times. It will not error it out. And on our left-hand side, it should appear in our table section. Let's go ahead and refresh this guy. Right-click on our stock price history. So stock price history is our final table structure. Stock price import is more like our staging temporary table. And let's open up the next script, which is to insert data from our import table to history table, right? So I've started this script. It's not finalized yet. Let's go ahead and run select. Now, there are a couple of ways to run the select statement. Let's say you wanted to check all of the columns for this table. You could type in select asterisk or select all from table. Click on execute. Or on your keyboard, you know, you could go ahead and click on F5. F5 will highlight everything within the script, including the use stock demo, go. Go is a special command line that instructs the compiler to say, execute the first command line and run it. That's what go means. So you can click on F5 on your keyboard or click on execute and you will see a nice display. So remember earlier I was saying that for our import table, date is not really like a date format. So when you do a sorting, it's not correct. So really our next goal is to import everything from our staging table over to our final table. The final table has the correct data types. In fact, you can expand your table structures. Click on columns, and it tells you the data types. In fact, we can compare both of them by expanding the stock price import. Stock price import has all of the varchart 1000, which is basically string or text format, and stock price history has all of the official data types that will allow us to apply our math operations as well as sorting. So let's run 2 queries. Let's see what happens. Okay. Now, the best thing to do is to specify the column name exactly. Best practice is never say select all, unless if you're only going to do it for demo purpose. So as far as grabbing all of the column names, the best thing to do is, first way is typing it out if you want to. So we could type in like something like this here. Give me the date, open, and select all. These words are reserved. That's why we have to use the brackets. So by using the bracket, we're telling SQL that we're not using the reserved words. We're using date and open in the context of our column names. So that's the reason why I've added brackets to these. This is a longer way. So the fastest way I would recommend is to go back to your stock price import table under columns. Go ahead and left click and drag it over to your main panel here. Click on execute, and we have all the column names displayed. Now keep in mind that we've only imported for NVIDIA. Later on, when we import it to this history table, we have to track the ticker name. So let's go ahead and copy all of the column names here. The difference is for ticker. So for this next part to work, we have to make sure the column names are lined up. So let's just say we have another column called NVIDIA. NVDA is the ticker, comma. For stock price history, we have to drag the column names from here. And let's run both of them. So it looks like this. Now, of course, when we type in NVDA, there's no alias here. So we could type in something called as ticker. When we say as ticker, it displays the ticker as the column alias name. So now our import table and our history table, column name-wise, matches up exactly. So it's easier to read. All right, the next step we want to do is to transform the select statements to an insert statement. So let's go ahead and copy the 2 select statements, and then we'll transform it to an insert. So for us to insert import into history, we have to first format the select statement. So now that the select statement is finalized, the next step is to put an insert in here. So we'll say insert, and the table name that we're going to be inserting into is this stock price history. Again, we can take out the brackets if it's easier to read. It's probably cleaner that way. We can go ahead and select the select statement, preview it one more time, no issues. And then for our insert statement, this is where we add the parentheses. Left parenthesis, right parenthesis. Inside the parentheses are the columns. Let's go ahead and copy the select statement columns we had from earlier. And then we can delete this out. We have our 2 original select statements on the top. We can do a preview. And now the next step is to insert. So let's go ahead and insert data from our import over to our history table. Of course, we're getting error messages. And let's see, what does this mean? Conversion failed when converting the varchart value 230 million plus numbers to data type int. Okay. And let's go ahead and run our select statement to preview it. So this is the issue. In our volume, there's actually a lot of commas. This will not work because, remember, in our history table, it's formatted as an integer. Integer means whole numbers. It cannot have commas in there. So we would have to add some kind of logic to strip out the volume here. So let's go ahead and maybe add some kind of cleanup logic here. We'll call this cleanup. Clean up logics, right? So this is where the magic happens. Let's go back to our stock table. Let's go ahead and strip out the commas, because really the commas that's causing it. So in here, we could, again, run the select, preview it, and then maybe transform the select into an update statement. For update, we want to say update the table name, set volume equals, we'll do a replace replace volume. Anything that has commas, replace it with a blank string. So this should do the trick. We're saying update table name, volume, strip out the commas with blanks. 256 rows were affected by. Another way to write this, maybe it's easier to see, is to give an alias for your table name. A lot of times I like to use single letters. Let's just say like letter S, short for stock price import. That's a table name. Replace the actual table name with your alias name. In this case is letter S. So we're saying update letter S, alias for this table name, set volume equals replace volume, strip out commas with blanks. Run this command line, means the same thing. And now we can go ahead and run a select statement. Let's go ahead and preview this table one more time. So now there's no commas here. That means that now this is numeric or integer friendly. That's what this is saying. All right. So let's go ahead and we'll keep the update statement, keep the select, and let's try to rerun this insert statement one more time. Error, of course, errored out. Let's see why it errored out. Let's go back to our select statement. So nothing was imported in our history table. So let's go back to our import table. So if you look at the import table, line number 7 has these weird characters, and also dividends line is not the same format as our historical price line. So another cleanup that we would have to do is to remove the dividends. There's a way to preserve the dividends line if we wanted to, but for this purpose, let's go ahead and remove the dividends line. First thing we want to do is to write a select statement. And we want to type the table name. Maybe it's too hard for you to type. You can go ahead and drag the table name from your Explorer panel over to your content panel. And the next thing is we want to add a where clause. So let's just filter only on our dividends line. So dividends line looks like it never has any kind of closing price file line. So we could say, give me all records where the close column is no. Let's go ahead and run this. It errors out because close is a special reserve word. We have to escape it with brackets. So now we have 5 dividends rows. Now the next step is for us to delete these out. Let's go ahead and give the table name an alias called letter S and transform the select to a delete statement. We'll say delete S, which is the table alias, delete S from table S where close is no. Remove 5 records, and we can come back to our select statement just to preview it. There we go. Now it's much cleaner. Right now we only have the historical stock price. Volume is numeric friendly. And we have 251 rows now. All right, it looks better. We'll keep this in here. And, you know, always add comments. Remove dividends records. Clean up logics. This one could be like, I don't know, preview data sets or something. Add some comments so we know what is the purpose of each section. And this one is to transfer data from import to history table. All right, let's come back to this guy. Let's see if this works now. There we go. 251 rows affected, no issues. Let's go ahead and do a preview. Final table. Select all. Let's see how this looks. Nice, we have our stock ticker, date, open, high, low, close, adjusted close, and volume. So this is our 4th script. Just like that, we have 1 year's worth of NVIDIA stock price for free using only SQL Management Studio. Now we can actually do a sort, order by date. And, you know, we can also do a date range filter. We want to say where the date is between, let's say, for example, we wanted to find prices between December 1st through December 15th. Let's go ahead and do so. And we should get 10 records back because there were only 10 trading days within December 1st through December 15th. Another way to write this is to do something like this. We can say, give me the month period of our date column. Escape with the brackets. I would say as far as best practice, it's probably better to not use reserved words. If it makes sense to you, maybe name this as price date, something in it that doesn't make this a reserved word anymore. So that way we don't have to constantly type in the brackets. So we could say, give me the month of December. Now, when we say December, it also includes 2023 and 2024. So to only specify for 2024, we have to say, give me the year period of our date column equals 2024. When we have multiple criteria, always use the and. So now we're saying, give me the month of December with the year of 2024. And now we have 10 records returned. Same as typing that between clause earlier. The other thing we want to do is, we can say, give me the average volume within December of 2024. We could type this function, AVG is the average, and then put in the column volume. This is the volume traded. So let's go ahead and put this number as average volume. So now we have volume and the average volume to look at, actually. Now, the next step is, let's apply some percentages, right? Let's just put it into a temp table. So grab the data from our stock price history, based on our filters, add it into a temp table. So now with our temp table, it's just temporary. With this temp table, we can manipulate the data in any way that we choose to. So let's say that we want to find some percentage differences between current day trading and the average volume trading to see if NVIDIA has any high spikes up or down. So we could write some kind of basic math formula here and say, okay, let's take volume minus average volume, and we'll call this volume diff. Run this query, volume diff, here's a number, but it's only good if we have some kind of percentages in here. So now let's just say that we take volume diff. Let's create another column here, call as percent calculation. There we go. So we'll copy this volume diff over, and we'll just call it volume. There's a couple ways to calculate this, but let's just use the volume diff, which is volume minus average volume divided by the volume as percentage calculation. Let's see what happens. Notice that it came out all 0 because when we're using the default data types, this may not know to preserve zeros. So we have to say times 0.00, so preserve the last 2 digits. Numerator and denominator. Go ahead and apply times 1.00. Use a parenthesis so it knows to execute this whole set first and then divide it by this one here. Parenthesis to close it. And let's go ahead and run our select statement. Boom. Now we have some sort of calculation. And if needed, this could be stored in a separate table or leave it as a temp table. So looking at the past 10 days or so, looks like NVIDIA didn't really have much spike. Now, NVIDIA appears to have the highest percentage. Actually, this is not still in percentage. This is still in decimal. To get it in percentage, we have to then times it by 100. This will give us the actual percentage. There we go. So now this is actual percentages here. Yeah, so it looks like, according to this, NVIDIA has some spikes up and down on certain days. Some days they were flat. So this could be another potential formula to apply to your SQL analytics and look for NVIDIA's, moving averages. Does some days have higher average than others or not? All right, next, let's go back here. So learn basic SQL. I've already covered some basic SQL techniques I normally perform for myself, as well as WorkWise. Now, there's a lot more SQL functions and a lot more advanced techniques. I'm afraid if I start showcasing some of these advanced techniques, it may be too overwhelming. But we essentially set up 4 scripts. So the last thing that I want to cover is to set up scripts to automatically import, clean, and analyze stock prices, right? The only problem is we have to run these 4 scripts separately every time. What if I told you there's a way to automatically click on a single button to run all of these fancy calculations for us. So let's go ahead and create another script. For step number 5, we'll call this store procedure. Again, we'll use Copilot to explain what is store procedure. What is SQL store procedure? A SQL store procedure is a pre-compiled collection of one or more SQL statements stored under a name and processed as a unit. That's what that is. So this is an example of a store procedure. For our case, we would like to create a store procedure that knows what stock ticker to add into our final table. So in order for this to work, let's go ahead and copy everything from our first script. Right now, I have my 4 scripts sorted from left to right. And the 5th script is on my left-hand side. So let's go ahead and copy all these here. We'll go and say, use stock demo. Yep, I just compile it. Number 2, we're going to do the bulk insert. Paste it down here. And we'll start adding steps here. Step 2. Right, here's step 1. Dash, dash, step 1. Step 3, we're going to copy all of the codes, place it into our store procedure script. Name this step 3. And always save your work while you're working on it, so that way you won't lose anything, just in case if your computer crash or loss of power. And step number 4, this is where we apply the transfer and cleanup method. So for this, I don't think we need to copy the preview data sets. We will only need a cleanup logic. Let's go ahead and copy the cleanup logics and paste it in as step number 4. And then here's the last one here. Step number 5 is the transfer data from import to history table. Let's go ahead and run this guy. No issues, that looks good. The other thing that we want to be careful is to not drop the table every time here. So for this one, since we have the table already created, actually we don't need a create table or drop table here. For our store procedures, there's no need to constantly create the table every time. So I basically strip out step 1. Once it's created, we don't have to continue creating that table. So really the first part is to start with step 2, bulk insert. But I would say for this, we have to change this slightly. We have to truncate the table every time. Every time when we do an import, make sure that the table is clear out. That's what this truncate table does. It's essentially like a delete statement, but it clears everything out faster. So it's truncate table, stock price import. It's important that we only run the truncate statement for stock price import, not our history table. The purpose of our history table is to preserve it every time. So this is really the first step. Let's call this step 1. Step 2 is where it actually does the cleanup. Step 2, cleanup logics. So it basically removes the dividends records and the volume has the comma replaced with blanks. And then the third step is where it imported to the history table. Now let's run this guy. Of course it's going to error it out now because we are trying to insert the same data here, which is fine. We purposely wanted to error it out so we know that if the same ticker and date combination exists, then do not insert it. Because if we insert it in again, we'll get duplicated records. So we purposely have that logic set right on our cluster index. This is the key that prevents duplication. It's important to have this keyword inside this history table, right? The final step for our store procedure is maybe like 5 or 4 parts to it. Now, it's not quite a store procedure yet. The next step is to create our store procedure. So we have to type in the keyword create space proc. Proc is short for store procedure. And the name we'll call this is process Yahoo stock price. Or let's just call this process stock price or something like that, right? And begin as end. Let's compile. We have it created. Now the second time, if we want to modify something, if we click on create again, we'll get an error message. That's because the object already existed. So for us to make enhancement to the store procedure, swap out the create keyword with alter. And then if you click on execute or F5, it will allow you to continue changing this. Now, we are not done yet, because notice that we hard-coded the word NVIDIA. And maybe, you know, we don't always want to import NVIDIA. Maybe we want to import Apple, AMD, you know, different stock ticker. So this is where we have to modify the store procedure and make it more dynamic. So rather than us using this NVIDIA keyword, next time, you know, for our file, make this more generic. Maybe call this stock price or something. You know, something more generic. Continue. And then, so that means in our store procedure, this will be called stock price. You know, whenever you download the next stock price, that will be the file name. And also in our history table is not always going to be NVIDIA. This could be other stock ticker. So we have to make this dynamic. So rather than hard coding the word NVDA, what we will do is to create parameters in here. So let's go ahead and create a parameter called ticker varchar 50. Compile. So ticker is our parameter now. So let's go ahead and copy the word ticker, replace this whole thing here. So now ticker, the variable, is passed to our ticker in our history table. It will always be dynamic based on whatever we pass in. So let's go ahead and alter. Now the next step is to QA. Always test out your codes. Don't assume just because we created something and there's no technical errors, it works fine. Always QA. That's why I tell people at work, always QA your work. Execute, and then type in your store procedure name. So for this, we have to pass in a parameter. In our stock price is called NVIDIA. So let's go ahead and type in NVIDIA. Of course, it's going to error it out because it exists. So for testing purpose, this is what we'll do. Let's go ahead and clear out the history table. For a demo purpose, let's clear it out as if this is the first time we're running it to verify our store procedures runs fine without any issue. All right. So select statement, and then we want to transform this to a truncate. Remember, truncate is going to wipe everything out, which is okay for our testing purpose. Truncate table, wipe it out. And we can run a select statement just to verify there's no more data. Okay, no more data. So this is the first time that we will import data for NVIDIA using a store procedure. Single click, highlight the command line, click on F5, go back to your select statement and preview it. Here we go. By having this store procedure in place, it now import data from Yahoo Finance, clean it out, and now these are numeric and date format ready for us. So we can apply filter based on date ranges. We can use the stock prices for calculation. All right, guys, that's all I have. I probably went overboard. There's a lot more techniques, store procedures I have written. I'll save it for the next video. Just a sneak peek under Stock Slicer, which is my main database. I have several tables already created and several store procedures created as well. Some of these are really advanced that it might be too overwhelming for you guys, especially the RSI calculation. This involves advanced mathematics, advanced SQL. You know, if some of you guys don't care about the codes, I'll probably upload it somewhere on GitHub or something where you can just download my codes and just run it. I always validate my outputs with some sort of third party like TradingView, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Yahoo Finance. All right, guys, that's all I have. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate it. Talk to you guys next time. Peace.